The ACLU is sounding the alarm that the Trump administration has deported even more children who are U.S. citizens. In a statement released Friday night, the organization saying New Orleans ICE agents deported at least 2 families early that morning. Among them, U.S. citizen children aged 2, 4, and 7 were deported with their mothers. It goes on to say the families who had lived in the United States for years, had deep ties to their communities, were deported from the U.S. under deeply troubling circumstances that raise serious due process concerns. The statement came after a federal judge in Louisiana raised concerns that a 2-year-old appeared to have been deported with her mother to Honduras with no meaningful due process. Fears grow over the administration's apathy toward constitutional rights. The recent FBI arrest of Milwaukee Judge Hannah Dugan has some members of Congress worried that the administration is openly trying to intimidate the courts. Joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Yasmin Ansari of Arizona. She recently returned from a trip to El Salvador with her colleagues to advocate for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the imprisoned Maryland man who the Trump administration admits it mistakenly deported. Congresswoman, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
American citizens, children are being sent away to countries they do not know because their parent is either undocumented, we don't know, or maybe they were a legal permanent resident and the United States took their, we don't know the details for some of the things. And these cases that Alicia laid on the table, these are just the ones we now know about. They are doing exactly what they said they would do. And I think people should be more up in arms about this, because these, like, if we're not going to stand for American citizens, the children, what are we standing up for?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I represent Phoenix, Arizona, a district that is extremely diverse. Many mixed status families. In general, 64 languages are spoken. So in my district, people have been very scared, sounding the alarm pre-Trump inauguration, but especially since. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think the people, even those who were skeptical before that, he's, believe that he truly was going after criminals, I think are now waking up to the reality that anyone could be next and there's no real due process going on here. And I think we should all be concerned. And I'm grateful to see that there's finally polling that shows for the first time Trump is underwater on immigration. I think that shows that the tide is shifting, because I just don't believe that the vast majority of Americans are okay with what is happening now when it comes to U.S. citizens.
You have the Washington Post going a little bit further into what both Alicia and Simone have put on the table, noting the government is not disputing the immigration status of any of the 3 children. Instead, officials contend that the undocumented mothers opted to take their citizen children with them back to Honduras. Put a pin in that. It's important. It is common that parents want to be removed with their children, Tricia McLaughlin, a spokesman for the Department of Homeland Security, told the Washington Post. It's important to note that lawyers for VML's father, Gracie Willis, says ICE refusal to allow the women to talk to their lawyers meant there was no way to verify whether that was true in these cases.
Right.
And the point I wanted you to put a pin in is the fact that it is common for parents to want to be removed with their children. So, folks, let's not get this twisted. They're using your kids as a way to deport you.
Right.
Because, in other words, you're not going to go if your mom with your...
I actually think it's the flip.
The flip.
They're using the
parents to deport the kids, to pull the kids.
Right.
But it's also a way in which you can make the case, which they're making, well, we didn't deport a U.S. citizen. The mother took her child with her.
Absolutely.
And that's the fallacy. That's the lie. It's all part of
because imagine you were in that room and all of a sudden a person who is in law enforcement says, you're going back to your home country. These kids are with you. You want them to come with you, or do you want them to come temporarily into our care?
Right.
I would never hand my children over to someone I did not know.
And that's why that's effectively using those children as a way to more readily and easily get you to leave, and without much of a fight. But then there's the last piece, where we don't know really what the status of any of these individuals are, and they don't have full access or any access to legal counsel.
Right.
How, as a member of Congress, oversight committee, we're sitting here, what what can be done? You almost feel like there's no movement. Everybody's looking to the courts, but there's no other pincer move to kind of pressure this administration to stop what it's doing.
I mean, I do think, frankly speaking, outside.
Be frank, Congresswoman.
Outside of the, typical ways any member of Congress would take action, which is legislatively, of course, I think in this moment, the actions that we take outside of our typical capacity are going to be so important to change public sentiment. I mean, that's frankly why my colleagues and I decided to go to El Salvador. I mean, we did this personally. This was not an official congressional delegation.
The speaker wasn't going to give you the official.
No, yeah, we got an official rejection actually from the chairman of the oversight committee, and then a few of us cared very deeply about this issue and within 48 hours planned this trip and worked directly with the family's lawyer for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and hearing directly from the lawyer telling us, thank you so much for doing this because this will keep the attention on this issue. And I think, again, just in the last couple of days, seeing the attention shift, and I went on Fox News and talked about it, and it was crazy to see just the lack of even like a real response to the unconstitutionality of it all. There was no real response. There was kind of just a mockery of, oh, the Constitution?
It's been 16 days since the Supreme Court ordered the White House to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man the government mistakenly deported to El Salvador. But in a new interview published yesterday by Time magazine, President Trump was asked if he's going to do anything to bring Abrego Garcia back like the Supreme Court ordered him to do. He replied, quote, "I leave that to my lawyers. I give them no instructions. They feel that the order said something very much different from what you're saying." Sounds like a no. Since sending more than 200 migrants to the notorious Sicat prison in El Salvador, Trump has said that, quote, homegrowns are next. By that, he means American citizens. And it appears he's continuing to push this issue to see how far he can go.
We also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country, but you'll have to be looking at the laws on that.
Now, during his Time magazine interview, the president was asked again if he really intends to send American citizens to foreign prisons. To that, he replied, quote, "I would love to do that if it were permissible by law. We're looking into that." U.S.-born and naturalized citizens, as well as lawfully permitted immigrants, have already been ensnared in Trump's immigration crackdown. That includes children and toddlers as young as 2 years old. Yesterday, a federal judge in Louisiana said that a 2-year-old child, an American citizen, appears to have been deported with her mother and sister to Honduras with no due process. The judge scheduled a hearing for next month, quote, "in the interest of dispelling our strong suspicion that the government just deported a U.S. citizen with no meaningful process." This is a very serious accusation. Lawyers for the government say the child's mother wished to take her with her to Honduras, but the judge says the court does not know that, and it appears that this deportation of a 2-year-old American citizen is not an isolated incident. The ACLU of Louisiana is also calling attention to at least 2 other American citizens who are children that were deported this week, a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, one of whom has a rare form of metastatic cancer. Joining me now is Alana Odoms, Executive Director of the ACLU of Louisiana, and Ray Suarez, host of the podcast Going for Broke and author of several books, including How We Are Home, Becoming American in the 21st Century, and Oral History. Alana, thank you for being with us. Tell us about the detainment of these children and these families. One child, as I just mentioned, is a cancer patient. One of the women is currently pregnant. They've been deported and cut off from their doctors, their medication, their health care. What kind of due process, if any, did they receive before they were deported?
Thank you for having me. So deportation, Donald, is not allowing any due process for families in the state of Louisiana or anywhere else in this nation. So I just want to share that families in Louisiana are being disappeared. Family A consisted of a pregnant mother with her 2 children, the youngest, who was 2 years old, who was an American citizen. They went into wellness checks, their regular check-ins with ICE. They were told that they would have access to counsel, that they would be able to make provisions for their minor children, and in fact, that was a ruse. They were not permitted to have access to their counsel. They were not permitted to make any kind of provisions for their children. And in a separate instance, another family experienced the same situation, went in, a mother with 2 young children, the youngest of whom you mentioned has metastatic kidney cancer, was told that they would be able to have their attorney. In fact, their attorney, Aaron Hebert, was with them. They were sequestered from their attorneys, were not permitted to have the opportunity to be advised by their attorneys. And in fact, those families were taken in at those regular wellness checks. And importantly, they were disappeared. Louisiana is one of the only states in the country that has an airport attached to the staging facility in Alexandria. So we believe, although we do not have direct knowledge because the government would not provide that to the attorneys, that these families were sequestered, were abducted, and were driven to Alexandria in the dead of night and put on planes at 6 a.m. in the morning, completely stripped of their due process, completely stripped of their rights, and frankly, were not able to make provisions for their children, which is directly against the regulations of ICE itself. They had guardians who were able to take custody.
Folks, this is the case that had Trump furious at Thomas and Alito and the other right-wing judges. The case where he deported an innocent man, a man who they could do almost anything, but send him where they did, send him to El Salvador. There was no due process, and he was deporting other people without due process, raising real concerns at the court. And this was always what was going to happen. Always. It was always going to start, and they do this all the time. It was always going to start with people who were allegedly criminals, and whether they were or they weren't. Let's say they were. Let's say they were, and they were actually bad guys. Some of those Venezuelans. They didn't get due process. And the whole point is that you're supposed to think it doesn't matter because they deserved it. But what we said, and I know you guys said this as well, is that it's going to start with them. And then it's going to be innocent people. And whether or not they're undocumented and they could be deported, they're not getting a due process. And then some of those people invariably are going to be accidentally sent away. And that's what happened to Kilmar. And then, of course, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from green card holders and lawful permanent residents being sent away. Again, without due process, maybe not even back to their home country. Locked away in a foreign concentration camp. That's what this is. And then, as we see, now it's U.S. citizens getting deported. Literal citizens. It's not even a due process issue. You shouldn't be able to deport a citizen. And so that's what's happening right now, guys. And so Trump took his anger at the Supreme Court and he's taking it out on just random people. Everyone thought, oh, somebody can stop him. Ivanka's going to stop him 4 years ago. She couldn't. She begged him for hours on J6. Didn't stop him. Right? And now it's like, oh, Clarence Thomas will stop him. Thomas said, sir, even for me, you're going too far. And that didn't stop him either.